Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Shamil Haikal bin Shahrul Nizam. Today, my groupmates and I will be presenting on the topic of scientific achievements in the Islamic civilization. In this presentation, we will be talking about the topics of medicine, mathematics, engineering, architecture, and also astronomy. But before we get into that, a little introduction to the topic. So, Islamic civilization at one point was a pinnacle of human civilization. During the golden age of Islam, Muslim scholars across the world made astounding discoveries and developments in various fields such as mathematics and science. In this presentation today, we will be going over some of the achievements made during this time period. First up, we'll be looking at Islamic architecture. Islamic architecture can actually be seen dotted all across the Muslim world. Usually, they are embodied in buildings such as mosques or shrines, but it can even extend to structures as simple as houses. Their roots to the design can actually be traced all the way back to the dawn of Islam. Initially, they are influenced by Persian, Roman, and Byzantine architecture, but eventually they evolved to become distinct to these cultures and often taking influences from the cultures of places where they were originally built at. However, they can still be identified by common features such as minarets, domes, geometrical patterns, and arches. So regardless of where these buildings are across the world, there are still certain parts that can still separate it and identify it as being an Islamic architecture. Now we'll be looking at the most iconic architect in Muslim history, as well as certain other very memorable Islamic architecture from across the world. So the person you can see now on the screen is actually called Mimar Sinan. He was born around the year 1488 in Agirnas in Turkey, and he was actually the chief architect for the Ottoman Empire during his lifetime. Throughout his life, he had actually designed more than 300 structures for several Ottoman caliphs. Some of his most famous works include the Selimiye Mosque and the Sulaimani Mosque, which we'll be looking at in the next slide. First up, we have the Selimiye Mosque. Commissioned by Sultan Selim II between the year 1568 and 1575 in the city of Aydin, Turkey, it consists of two equal parts in the form of a rectangular courtyard and prayer hall, each measuring some 60 by 44 meters in area. The courtyard itself is decorated with a beautiful ablution area made with carved and pierced stones. Wanting to surpass the Hagia Sophia, Mimar Sinan actually made sure that the central dome was even bigger than the Hagia Sophia's due to some common rhetoric that Muslim architectures could never surpass Christian architects during that time period. Actually, we can see that its minarets were actually some of the Ottomans' tallest, measuring some 70.89 meters tall. The building's highlight, however, is the way everything revolves around the main dome, decorated with beautiful geometrical patterns that flows with the walls and pillars inside the building. Next, we have the Sulaimaniye Mosque. The mosque was actually built during the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent around the year 1550 in the city of Istanbul, now in the country of Turkey. The Sulaimaniye Mosque draws its influence from both Ottoman and Byzantine cultures, as is prevalent in its domes and minarets. The mosque's courtyard is lavishly decorated with fine stones like granite and houses 4 minarets and 10 galleries. The 4 minarets was actually supposed to symbolize the Sultan's endowment of the mosque itself, and the 10 galleries were supposed to symbolize the Sultan being the 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Sultanate. Its main dome is actually supported by smaller domes on the inside and arches, and is covered by buttresses. These buttresses are actually one of the most unique feature of the mosque itself. The rest of the interior, however, is actually sparsely decorated with just some Islamic tile work and ivory design. However, don't let this fool you, as the architectural marvel in terms of its size, measuring 59 meters squared in area, is still actually very impressive and makes it one of the largest mosques in Turkey even until today. Moving out of Turkey, for the last building in the slides regarding architecture today, we have the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was originally commissioned in the year 1631 by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan as a mausoleum for his favorite deceased wife. The structure of the building itself was actually made out of marble and was lined with four minarets, reminiscent of the Islamic influence that was prevalent in this area during that time period, and was actually topped with a central dome too. The surrounding structure was actually equipped with a huge charbagh garden that leads up to the buildings, which also contains four intersecting canals representing one of India's four holy rivers. Decorating the walls are intricate calligraphy and pietra dura stonework that also boasts beautiful mosaic mural, abstract art, and beautiful vegetable motifs. The vegetable motifs themselves actually contain various plant species with its own hidden meanings, like the lotus symbolizing purity and eternity, and the tulips representing love. That is all for today in regards to the slides of architecture in the Islamic world.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hanan Inshira, metric number 2112492, and I'll be talking about the medical achievements within the Islamic civilization. Islamic medical discoveries during medieval time was more advanced in comparison to Catholic Europe. The Catholic Europeans were stuck in their superstitions and teaching from the church, and the Islamic world was going through our golden age. Islamic scholars and doctors translated medical texts from all around the world into Arabic, and it was later translated into Latin. But they did not rely solely on these books. They added their own studies and observations and resulted in their own discoveries. With the concept of zakat in Islam, we were able to build hospitals, and these hospitals were places for treating the poor and needy, as well as a place for study and research, furthering our discoveries within the medical industry. So, the Islamic medical industry resulted in discoveries of diseases, the human anatomy, pharmaceutical, and surgical. But it did not only expand the industry, the translations of medical texts are used as sources for modern and future doctors within the industry. So, within our whole civilization, there are prominent scholars. I will be talking about three that I believe had the most impact towards our current medical field. The first scholar is Abu Bakr al-Razi. He was born in Iran and is a celebrated alchemist, philosopher, and physician. He surpassed his teacher and became director for two hospitals in his lifetime, and he wrote 224 books. His most notable books would be the Book of Smallpox and Measles, as well as Liver Continence. Not only that, he contributed to neurology and neuroanatomy and was the first physician to differentiate concussions from other similar neurological conditions. He is most famous for his description and differentiation of smallpox from measles, these two illnesses that are still confused until very recently. He wrote on pediatrics, and he covered topics from skin, eye, and ear diseases to chapters solely dedicated on paralysis and epilepsy. His most notable inventions within the pharmaceutical sphere would be the pestle and mortar, flasks, spatulas, beakers, and even glass vessels. All these instruments are still used today. The next scholar is Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna by Europeans. He was born in Uzbekistan and memorized the Quran at the age of 10 and was also fluent in Arabic. He studied Islamic law, jurisprudence, philosophy, logic, and natural science. At the age of 13, he studied medical science, and at the age of 18, he was an established physician. He wrote approximately 450 books and articles. 240 still exist, and 40 of them focus on medicine. One of his books, The Book of Healing, is an expansive scientific encyclopedia, and his most notable book, The Canon of Medicine, is a five-volume textbook in Arabic and was later translated into several languages. This book described practical and scientific theories about physiology and mental illnesses, and it set standards in the Middle East as well as Europe. This wonderful book is still used as reference and a source in present university lectures. The final scholar I'll be talking about is Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi. He was born in Cordoba, Spain, and wrote The Clearance of Medical Science for Those Who Cannot Compile It. It is a summary of 50 years of medical education, training, practice, and experience. 30 volumes with various sections such as midwifery and pharmacological, and many more. And he also dedicated three chapters to surgery, so there is no doubt that he's known as the father of operative surgery. One of his books, titled On Surgery, was dedicated to surgical instruments. It gave detailed descriptions of the usage of probes, surgical knives, scalpels, and hooks. It also introduced 200 surgical tools. He was also the person who invented surgical scissors, grasping forceps, and obstetrical forceps. And not only that, he contributed early descriptions of neurosurgical diagnosis and treatments to head injuries, skull fractures, spinal injuries, and dislocation, many more. He also utilized catgut as sutures. So all of his discoveries are still being used to the present day medical industry. That is all for me. I'll be passing it on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mariam Shaira Haruni. My metric number is 2110582, and this is the mathematics achievement from the Muslim scholars back in the ancient time. The first thing that I want to talk is the overview of mathematics back in the early centuries of the Islamic era. Islamic mathematical achievement initially began during the early century advancements in India, and the fast spread of Islam occurred between the time of Muhammad's return to Mecca in 630 from his exile in Medina, and Muslims started to study other cultures, and during the reign of Khalifah al-Mansur, Arabic translation of Persian and Indian astrological texts existed, and the House of Wisdom, a translation and research facility, was built in Baghdad under the rule of Caliph al-Mansur. Christian experts translated from Greek and Syriac the majority of the time, while Muslim patrons like the caliphs and powerful people like Banu Musa provided the inspiration and funding for this work. They learned Greek, Indian, and Chinese mathematics, which included geometry and trigonometry. Muslim mathematicians were the first to study algebra, and they also helped to establish it as a separate field of study. Adopting Indian numerals encouraged commerce, trading, and financial advancements, including the use of the early version of the bank check and the invention of algebra and other contemporary mathematical techniques. The main founder of mathematics in the Islamic world is Ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. He was born in 780 and died around 850. He is well known for his mathematical and scientific works, including algebra, from where the word algebra was derived, and algorithm, a book on computation that bears his name. The Latinized form of his name gave rise to both of these titles. In the Middle Ages, he taught algebra, Hindu-Arabic numbers, and methods of arithmetic to European mathematicians. Al-Khwarizmi resided in Baghdad and was employed by the House of Wisdom, Darul al-Hikmah, under the rule of Khalifa al-Ma'mun. The House of Wisdom purchased and translated works of philosophy and science, especially Greek works, and also produced original research. The Latin translation of Al-Khwarizmi's book on elementary algebra, Al-Kitab al-Muqta fi Isab al-Jabar wal al-Muqabbala, which means the compendious book of calculation by completion and balancing, in the 12th century, is where the word algebra and its title originate. Instead of the abstract notation now associated with the topic, algebra is a collection of rules and demonstration for solving linear and quadratic equations based on intuitive geometric concept. It has part on how to apply mathematics to solve inheritance problem using the ratios outlined by Islamic laws, as well as sections on calculating the areas and volumes of geometric forms. Hindu-Arabic numerals and the arithmetic were introduced to the West in the 12th century by Al-Khwarizmi in his second book. It is called Algoritmi de Number Indorum, That means Al-Khwarizmi concerning the Hindu art of reckoning. It is the only Latin version that has been preserved, and this is where the word algorithm is derived from his name, algorithmi, which is a name in Latin. And his kitab, called Kitab Surat Al-Ar, which translates to the image of the earth, was his third significant book. The coordinates of places in the known globe were reported in his book. Last but not least, he also put together a collection of astronomical charts based on various Greek and Hindu sources. This astronomical book was translated into Latin, just like his works on algebra and Indo-Arabic numerals. The other prominent mathematician Muslim scholars include Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham al-Buzjani, Thabit ibn Qurrah, Ibrahim ibn Sinan, and Omar Khayyam. The first one is Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, which his full name is Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, was born in Basra, Iraq in about 965, and he passed away in Cairo, Egypt around 140. This in the West, he was known by the Latinized version of his name, Al-Hasin or Al-Hazin. He was a mathematician and astronomer who made important contribution to the utilization of scientific experiments and optical concepts. The most significant book of Ibn al-Haytham is Kitab al-Manazir, or it is called Optic, which represents the right model of vision using an experiment that mathematical reasoning based on angles of incidence and deviation. And in order to obtain the volume of paraboloid, he also established the sum formula for the fourth power, which can be easily generalized to the sum of any integral power. The second scholar is Al-Buzani. His full name is Abu al-Wafa al-Buzani. His longer full name is Muhammad ibn Yahya ibn Ismail ibn al-Abbas Abu al-Wafa al-Buzjani. He was born on June 10, 940 in Buzgan, Iran, and died on July 15, 998 in Baghdad at the age of 58. He made important contribution to the development of trigonometry systematically while working at a private observatory in Baghdad, where he took observations to ascertain, among other astronomical parameters, the city's latitude and the duration of season and the obligatory of ecliptic. The third other prominent mathematicians, Muslim scholars, is Thabit ibn Qurrah, which his full name is Abu al-Hasan ibn al-Zahrun al-Harani al-Sabi. He was born in 836 in Syria and died in 901 in Baghdad. He was the author of a treatise. The fourth prominent Islamic mathematician scholars were Ibrahim ibn Sinan. He was the grandson of Thabit ibn Qurrah, and he was born in 908 in Baghdad, and he died in 946 in Baghdad. He is frequently mentioned as being the most greatest mathematician of all time, and he was a mathematician and astronomer who focused on tangents to circles when studying geometry. He expanded the academic's work by making improvements to the theory of integration and the quadrature of the parabola. Last but not least is Omar Khayyam. His full name is Riyad al-Din Abu al-Fath Umar ibn Ibrahim al-Nisaburi al-Khayyami, who was born on May 18, 1048 in Nishapur, northern Persia, and died on December 4, 1131 in Nishapur. He was the son of a wealthy physician called Ibrahim Khayyami, and Omar was well known as a Persian mathematician, astronomer, and a poet. His work, Risalah fil Barahin ala Musail al-Jabar wal-Muqabbala, which means the treatise on demonstration of problems of algebra, which is the foundation of his mathematical renown, that was written when he was traveling to Samarkand at one point of his life, and he had previously had a good education in science and philosophy in Nishapur. He provided a methodological explanation on how to solve cubic equations. And when the Sultan of Seljuk, named Malik Shah, called him to Isfahan to conduct the astronomical observation, he also accomplished the reform of calendar known as the Jalali calendar.
My name is Mariam, and I will be explaining to you the next science of field, which is astronomy. So, first I would like to cite a verse from the Quran, which is, "We have not created the heaven and the earth and all that is between them in mere idle play. None of this have we created without an inner truth, but most of them understand it not." So in this Holy Quran's revelation, it basically aims to provoke thought, thinking, among other things, and in order to communicate a profound sense of awe at the numerous signs of our Lord, which are obvious to people who employ reason. The Holy Quran digs into many manifestations of Allah in nature, around us and also inside us. Since the moon, stars, and the sun, as well as the planet, is the creation of Allah, human must not just appreciate these creations but also explore them better. So this is why our Muslim scholars had made an advancement or improvement in the field of astronomy. Islamic astronomers basically created a wealth of advanced astronomical work between the 8th and also 15th centuries. They developed devices that enhanced their capacity for making observations, improved the Ptolemaic system largely through Ptolemaic framework. The vast contributions of Islamic astronomy also made the Ptolemaic and Aristotelian systems' flaws more apparent, and all of these findings and also improvements served as the foundation around which Islamic astronomy developed. And like so much of the Islamic knowledge, they were also transmitted to Europe and contributed to the Renaissance. So all of the observations and also the improvements that were made by the Muslim scholars were basically transmitted to Europe, and it contributed to the Renaissance. So all of these findings had impacted the Renaissance period. So here are the three Muslim scholars in astronomy. First is Al-Farghani, the second one is Al-Batani, and the last one As-Sufi. We will be discussing their achievements in the field of astronomy. So for our first Muslim scholar in the field of astronomy is Al-Farghani, and his full name is Abu Abbas Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Kathir Al-Farghani, and he is known as Farghanes in the West. Al-Farghani had written books about astronomy. The first book is on the construction of the astrolabe, and the second one is on the astronomical tables of Al-Khawarizmi, and the third one is the elements of astronomy. He had also written other books, which are Al-Kamil fi al-Astrolabe, Qadwal al-Farghani, Al-Ma'rifat al-Awqat allati yakun al-Qamar fiha fawq al-ard aw tahtaha hasab al-Akil as-Saba. So these are few books that he had written during his life. However, for today's discussion, we will be discussing more on the book of Elements of Astronomy. So Elements of Astronomy was composed in the year of 833, and it was more on celestial motions and had 30 chapters, including a thorough examinations of the signs of stars. It had essentially served as a synopsis or a summary of Ptolemy's Almagest, and everything regarding elements of astronomy. The content of it was descriptive as well as mathematical. So now we will be discussing what are the differences in between Ptolemy and also Al-Farghani's discovery. The first difference is that in chapter 8, which is regarding the diameter of the earth, Ptolemy calculated the length of a degree to be 93 kilometers. However, Al-Farghanis calculated it and decided that the value should be 111 kilometers. And in this case, Al-Farghani's value was more accurate than Ptolemy's. The next difference that we were able to identify is that in chapter 21, which provides the information about the sizes of the planets as well as their greatest distances from the earth, Ptolemy, however, had only provided the information regarding the magnitudes and also distances of Sun and also the Moon, not those of any other planets. And as for this issue, it was agreed by many and also it was proved by Al-Farghani that it is more simple and easier to determine the diameters and also the magnitudes of the planets by including the planets and also not only calculating the Sun and also the Moon. Now we will move on to the next Muslim scholar, which is Al-Batani. So for his background, Al-Batani's full name is Jabir ibn Sinan al-Harani, and his Latinized name is Al-Batanius. He is an astronomy instrument maker. Basically, he makes instrument for the field of astronomy, and Al-Batani can be identified based just on his name, and it is quite likely that he learned how to construct astronomy instruments from his father, as his father was also an astronomy instruments maker. Just an overview regarding Al-Batani's achievement. At Antioch and also Arraqah in Syria, Al-Batani conducted astronomical measures that were remarkably accurate. Most of the observations that were made in the town of Arraqah, which flourished after Caliph Harun al-Rashid constructed several palaces there. Other than that, Al-Batani is referred to as one of the most well-known observers and a pioneer in geometry, theoretically and also practically in astronomy. And Astrology by Fihris, a writer of a 10th century overview of Muslim civilization, in his astronomical work, which included tables, he recorded his own observations of the sun, moon, and celestial bodies, as well as more precise account of their motions than that found in Ptolemy's Almagest. So he basically had made precise calculations, precise findings regarding to Ptolemy's Almagest as well. Now we will look at Al-Batani's achievements. First, he had catalogued 489 stars. He had refined the existing values for the length of year, which he gave as 365 days, 5 hours, 46 minutes, 24 seconds, and of the seasons. He had calculated the precisions of equinoxes and obtained the value of the inclination of the ecliptic. Al-Batani had also made a significant advancement by adopting trigonometric procedures as opposed to geometrical approaches, which other scientists had previously employed. This is because Al-Batani demonstrated that the sun's maximum distance from the earth changes, making both annular and complete eclipses of the sun possible. There are several reasons why Al-Batani is significant to the advancements of science, but one of them must be significant impact of his work had on individuals like Tycho Brahe, Kepler, Galileo, and also Copernicus. So all of his achievements, all of his findings had impacted individuals. His findings had influenced all of these individuals' findings as well. So those are his achievements in the field of astronomy. As for Al-Batani, for the last Muslim scholars in field of astronomy, his name is As-Sufi, and his full name is Abdurrahman As-Sufi, or known as Az-Zafi in the West. During the Middle Ages, he was an outstanding practical astronomist. Among his achievements were nebulosity, charts of the sky, and also color of the cirrus or Alpha Canis Majoris. For the nebulosity, the Andromeda nebula's nebulosity was first described by As-Sufi in his book of constellations named Atlas of Heavens, and after hearing from Arab navigators in the Malay archipelago, he gave the southern group of stars the name Al-Bakar Al-Abyad, or White Bull, and now this constellation is known as Nebula Major, or the Greater Magellanic Cloud. As-Sufi's next achievement or next impactful finding is regarding the charts of the sky. So based on As-Sufi's own observations, he had created charts of the skies, and also he had meticulously determined their magnitudes. And his work on stellar astronomy is basically a classic. It is named the name of the book is Kitab Kawatib Al-Thabit Al-Musawwar. Even today, Kitab Kawatib is regarded as crucial for the study of correct motions and long-term factors. He listed the 13 brightest stars known at the time, including the Eridani in it. It was one of the first magnitude when Ulugh Beg, the grandson of Timur or Tamerlane, discovered in it in his list of fixed stars in 1437. It was a star of third magnitude when Edmund Halley visited St. Helena at the beginning of the 18th century. So that was the explanation for the charts of skies, which is one of As-Sufi's greatest findings. So now we have come to the final finding of As-Sufi, which is regarding the color of the cirrus, or as known as Alpha Canis Majoris. So the cirrus or Alpha Canis Majoris, according to As-Sufi, have a constant color, and this has been supported by subsequent findings. Ironically, Seneca claimed to have seen it red in Rome, and Ptolemy had seen it reddish in Alexandria, and Schmidt had seen it white in Athens after initially discovering it in yellow. These contradictory observations are assumed to have been the result of regional weather changes. So these are basically all of the achievements and also all of the findings made by As-Sufi. So now we know that I have given you three Muslim scholars in the field of astronomy, and all of their findings have influenced to the civilization, and they have made very meaningful impact on the field of astronomy. So that's all from me, which is regarding astronomy. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Rashikin, and I will be continuing with the presentation on the next area of scientific achievement, that is engineering. So in engineering, the most prominent scholar during the Islamic civilization is Al-Jazari. So Al-Jazari, or his full name was Badi al-Zaman Abu al-Is Ismail ibn al-Razi al-Jazari, was a Muslim engineer who developed devices powered by water and experimented with automatic machines of all sorts. He was part of a tradition of artisans, and he was more than a practical engineer than an inventor, who appears to have been more interested in the craftsmanship necessary to construct the devices rather than in the technology which lay behind them. And his machines were usually assembled by trial and error rather than by theoretical calculation. So he is most famously known for his writing or the book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, or in Arabic called as Kitab fil Ma'rifat al-Ihyal al-Handasiyah. So here in this book, he has described around 50 mechanical devices along with its instruction on how to construct them. So the book style resembles our modern DIY book, and he has been described as the father of robotics and father of the modern day engineering. So in his book, he has categorized the 50 ingenious mechanical devices into 6 categories. However, for the purpose of this assignment, I will only elaborate 3 of the devices that we can see to be modernized during our current time. So the first and foremost, his most famous invention, that is called the elephant water clock. Second, the automated hand washing inventions. And lastly, the machine lifting water by means of a wheel, and the technology of double action pump. Al-Jazari's elephant water clock is one of his greatest masterpieces listed under the category 1 of his book, that is on the construction of clocks from which can be told the passage of the constant and solar hours by means of water and candles. So this water clock is automated using a water-powered timer inspired by an Indian mechanism known as Gatika, which is a hemispherical vessel made of copper with a small hole at the bottom placed inside a large water bowl or a tank. So every time the bowl sank, a specific period of time would have elapsed and a gong was sounded to mark it. As well as telling the time, this grand beautiful water powered clock was actually a symbol of status, grandeur and wealth. The clock incorporated a figure of a scribe and a span that moved to indicate the number of minutes past the hour. So the clock has many intricate parts, as it was believed that the clock reflected cultural and technological influences from many civilizations, such as Indian timer technology, and Egyptian phoenix, Greek hydraulic technology, Chinese dragons, an Indian elephant, and mechanical human figures in Arabian dress, or to be exact, turban. Meaning to say, the clock was not only a beautiful masterpiece to look at, but it had a carefully put together mechanism. So how does it work? So the number of hours since sunrise is shown on the silver and black disc at the top of the clock, and the number of minutes into the hour is shown by the scribe span. So the movement of the clock are regulated by a most wonderful mechanism that sits in a stand inside the elephant's body, a perforated floating bowl which is similar to Gatika mentioned before. There is a small hole in the floating bowl that regulates the speed at which it sinks. As it slowly submerges over a half an hour, it tugs via a system of pulleys, the scribe and the span. When it is completely submerged, the bowl quickly tilts, sinks, and triggers a more dramatic sequence of events. Inside the cup holder at the top of the clock, a channel of ball is tilted so that a stopper is lifted to allow one to fall, hitting a fan that turns the phoenix. So the ball then drops out of one of the falcon's beaks into the serpent's mouth as the serpent falls, rotating around its pivot. The weight of the ball tugs a rope that resets the ball back to the surface of the water. The ball then drops again into a vase that triggers a hood and hits a cymbal which sounds the half hour. As the ball collects in a trough, the float begins to submerge again, and the whole process repeats itself with the subtle adjustment for the second half of the hour. Now moving on to the next invention. As we know, water and its usage holds a particular importance in Islam, both as being an integral part of the pre-prayer washing process, that is wudu and ghusl. Additionally, with Mesopotamia being a naturally drought-ridden place, machines reading the water had a very significant function, in both a divine and practical sense. Therefore, an entire section of the book of Al-Jazari was devoted to a fountain mechanisms categories. One of it was Al-Jazari Peacock Fountain, which was a more sophisticated hand-washing device featuring humanoid automata as servants which offer soap and towels. So basically, on how this machine works is that a servant will bring the basin and position it so that the beaks of the peacock is facing the master. The servant then pulls a hidden lever in the tail of the peacock and water begins to flow. Then the left door opens and mechanical slave emerges holding a soap. Toward the end of the washing, the right door opens and another mechanical slave emerges, and this time holding a towel to dry the master's hands. Another similar invention is the female humanoid automaton standing by a basin filled with water, which also has a similar application in which when the user pulls the lever, the water drains and the female automaton refills the basin. So therefore it can be seen that these amazing inventions of hand-washing automata are incorporated as a flush mechanism, which is now used in our modern flush toilet. So last but not least is the invention of the double-action automatic suction pump, which stipulated under the category 5 of the books. So here the system would have been placed into a river or any running stream, which will raise the water to a higher point. The pump here had cogwheels, copper piston, suctions, delivery pipes, and one-well valves, where it sucked water for irrigation and sanitation up to around 12 meters into the supply system. It is basically an early example of the double-acting principle of one piston who will suck the water while the other will deliver it. By using this copper piston, effective seals, and flapper valves, Al-Jazari has made a pump that sucks up water from the river into two cylinders that then will be emptied their contents into a single shear outlet above the machine. So what I'm trying to say here is how this pump works is that this pump is driven by a water wheel which drives through a system of gears and oscillating slot rod to which the rods of two pistons are attached. The pistons work in horizontally opposed to cylinders, each provided with valve-operated suction and delivery pipes. So the delivery pipes are joined above the center of the machine to form a single outlet into the irrigation system. Therefore, it could be seen that this water raising machine had a direct significance for the development of modern engineering, and it is remarkable for three reasons. The first, known use of a true suction pipe which sucks fluids into a partial vacuum in a pump. And second, the first application of the double-acting principle, we could see here. And lastly, the device that uses a crank and connecting rods to transform rotational motion into reciprocating motion. So all in all, we can see that there are many scientific achievements done by our amazing scholars during the Islamic civilization. Our Muslim scientists have been pioneers in the prevention of blindness toward the scientific area. They have helped in laying foundation for an experimental science with their contribution to the scientific method and the empirical, experimental, and quantitative approach to scientific inquiry. The developments would only appear to have occurred in Europe, which was largely dormant during the Dark Ages, if only there was a direct contact with Islamic knowledge in Spain and France until the fall of Constantinople. Thus, the initial development of modern science did not occur in Italy with the spectacular work of Galileo, but in the Islamic world several centuries earlier, where it slowly and gradually advanced in ways that have been largely ignored by the scholars in Western Europe. Therefore, as a young generation as well as a Muslim students, we must keep seeking knowledge and following their steps in contributing to the world rather than just keep silent, consuming whatever the Western people invent or provide to us. We have to stop being blind consumer and start being a giver and inventor.